All right, you all, welcome. Let's get started. Any announcements, events, things you want to tell each other before we turn it over to our guest? Nothing? All right, that's rare, but I'll take it. So today we are happy to introduce Dr. Jackie Berry. Dr. Berry earned her PhD in psychology at the University of Albany, briefly taught here at SUNY New Paltz, and is now teaching at RPI. Today our topic is beauty culture, and I think if this class does one thing well, it is that we always look for the interesting, the problematic, the complex, and the radical way into a topic. So I do believe Dr. Berry is going to do that for us today. So please help me welcome her.
Yay! Is this one muted right here? Ooh, this works nicely. Excellent. How's everyone doing? I apologize. I have a sore throat, so I'm going to sound a little raspy. But that's not a bad thing. I always thought women with raspy voices were like more attractive. Yes! Or Demi Moore, those kind. I always wanted to have those kinds of voices. So whenever I had a cold, I would talk more than normal. Can these doors get closed on the sides? Thank you. So how much do you guys know about beauty pageants? Or let me just rewind that. Has anyone here ever been in a beauty pageant? You've been in a beauty pageant. Do you want to share? You don't have to.
I was 17 and looking for a way to find myself appealing.
Yep.
And I entered and went through like the test, and then they told me that I'd have to cover up my tattoos that I already had. And I was like, yeah, nope.
Not so much, right?
Yeah.
But that's funny. You ended up not participating, correct?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you still found out who you were, which is you weren't willing to give up your tattoos, right? So it still worked, even though you weren't in it.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. You were in a pageant?
Yeah, when I was like 12. So,
That's fine. A lot of children are in pageants. We're going to talk about adult pageants, but a lot of children are in pageants too. Go ahead.
basically, I just had to answer a bunch of questions in a gown, and then for one of the parts, I had to like walk in any style, like a different outfit and any style on it. So I did like cowgirl theme.
Yep.
Yeah.
So did you spend a lot of time training and preparing and all sorts of stuff like that?
Yeah, not a lot of time because I wasn't like so serious about being a pageant, and it was my first pageant, but I did dedicate time.
Yeah, yeah. And did you get out of it what you were looking for? Or something more or less?
Yeah, it was a fun experience, and it helped me like work on like presenting in front of a big audience.
Yes, you have to be able to speak in front of a large crowd, potentially millions of viewers. Anybody else know anybody or have been in a beauty pageant before? Okay, so I'll just give you some brief background. As I was just introduced, I was a professor here for a few years after graduating with my PhD from the University of Albany. And I'm now at RPI. I have 4 college degrees, including a Master's of Business Administration and a Master of Science in Human Factor Psychology. And for some reason, I decided I wanted to be in a pageant, literally out of the blue. Not having done it from childhood, not having done it at any point, already with a career, married, a mom. Oh, I want to be in a beauty pageant. Who does that, right? Well, apparently I do. But the question is, this day and age, women's roles are changing, and the conversation around women and their bodies is changing a lot. So is this something that's appropriate for women to do, whether they're a teenager or whether they're a grown-up adult like myself? Or is it something that maybe is anti-feminist or anti-women? I won't ask you guys to give your opinions yet. I would like to find out from you what you think. But I'm just going to make a suggestion that before you make a judgment, if you think beauty pageants are pro-women or anti-women or pro-feminist or anti-feminist, watch the whole presentation, and then form a judgment, or don't. Just leave it open. You don't have to. If you're not going to be in one, maybe it doesn't matter to you, right? Okay, so let's look at a brief history of the Miss America pageant. That's the premier pageant. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Mrs. Dutchess County. This means I'm running for Mrs. New York America. If I win that, then I get to run for Mrs. America, which would be awesome. And if I win that, then I get to run for Mrs. World. So here's the interesting thing. Originally, the Miss America pageant started when women were coming out of the age of the Edwardian and Victorian periods and didn't want to be perceived as frail. So back during, like just before and the years prior with the women's suffrage movement and trying to get the right to vote, women were these delicate, sort of pale creatures who couldn't get too much sun. You know, this is a classic example. You know, they can't go outside and they're just treated like they're very, very fragile. The Miss America organization came out in 1921, crowning the first Miss America, and they presented a different ideal of a woman. Guess what? She's not frail. She's not going to die if she gets in the sun. She can eat right and exercise and not be treated like, you know, some invalid who can't do anything but have babies and look pretty. So it got off to a rocky start in the beginning because the pageant was held off and on. There was a lot of stuff going on in the 20s and 30s, specifically like with the Great Depression and stuff. So they had the pageant for a few years coming right after the women's suffrage movement, and then it stopped because of the Great Depression, and then it started again, and then it stopped again, and this went on and on and on. So it wasn't really a solid part of our history for quite some time. So the pageant that they held shortly after the Great Depression was actually supposed to be for economic reasons. The organizers were arguing, listen, people come to Atlantic City. Yes, Atlantic City, New Jersey, the original place where the pageant was held, is still where the Miss America pageant is held to this day. People come, they want to see the attractions, they want to walk on the boardwalk, they want to ride rides, they want to do all of this stuff. So you need to hold this pageant again, but it still just didn't quite take hold. So it didn't really get revived fully again until around 1935, after the Great Depression was mostly over. So there were innovations to raise the pageant's public image, such as adding the talent portion. So as a lot of you might know, yes, you have to walk out in a bathing suit. Yes, you have to walk out in an evening gown. Yes, you have to answer questions in front of the judges and the audience. But you also, in the case of Miss America, have to have some special hobby or talent that you can perform, like singing or playing the piano or something like that. So the 1940s and 50s, we saw a turn. Now it's starting to actually take a hold. And what I mean by take a hold is, very wisely, the Miss America pageant organizers were smart enough to say, guess what? We can use this as a way to boost morale, which is very low during World War II. And we can iconify, for lack of a better word, ourselves by attaching ourselves to American pride in the midst of this war period where people are rationing and women don't have a lot, and a lot of the 40s hairstyles you see are because all they had were pin curls. They didn't have the curlers that we had today, and they didn't have, like we have fishnet stockings, they would actually draw the lines on their legs to simulate fishnet stockings because that was something that most women couldn't afford or couldn't have in the 1940s. Women were also going in the workforce because the men are off at war, so they've got to be the ones, you know, this famous picture with the woman, you know, we can do it. That's all happening as a result of the war effort. So Miss America was very smart in their branding, and their argument was, number one, we're going to associate this with the wartime effort, and we're going to send whoever wins the Miss America pageant off to entertain the troops wherever they happen to be around the world. And number two, we're going to invent a scholarship program. This is key. When I mean scholarship program, meaning if you win, it's not just, hey, look, you're like the most attractive woman in America. It's also, you get money to go to school, which is huge, even today. So that's probably the single most important innovation that the Miss America pageant made in the 1940s. So this is interesting because no one cared about women at this time. What I mean when I say nobody cared about women is the GIs are coming home, there's the infamous kiss, it's the baby boom. People are wanting to settle down, they want to get married, the guys are home from the war. No one's thinking about women's education. everyone's thinking about it's time to start our families and move on with our lives. So this is one of the few organizations that's like, no, I get that we're preoccupied with the fact that GIs are returning from the war, but women's education and women's issues are still important. Then, sometime around then, we started having television. Up to then, it was just radio. And then the American public started to be able to see, because now rather than just hearing about it in newspapers, the televised images are coming into their homes. And they're able to see, oh wow, this is a thing, and this is you know, a way to sort of rally behind a single national symbol. So the first time the Miss America pageant organization was in people's houses, and they could actually appreciate what was going on in Atlantic City and not just think about it or see it from afar by reading newspapers. So by the 40s and 50s, the Miss America pageant and the Miss America organization had a solid foothold in American culture. So by the 50s, it was solidly entrenched. Everyone knew what Miss America was. It was quite popular. There was also, and we're going to talk about this later, a demonstration against the Miss America pageant in 1968. But by 1970, there was a rise in television ratings, but people are still questioning the relevance of Miss America. And you got to think about 1970, what's going on. It's the end of the Vietnam War. There's, you know, all of these changes, political upheaval. People are still questioning the relevance. But for whatever reason, pageants are still happening. They're not stopping. And it's still solidly entrenched as Miss America is the symbol of the ideal American woman. By the 1980s, it still maintained its prominence, even though people are still basically questioning, is this relevant? Is this something that we should still be doing? So for the Miss America organization, the 1990s marked a new era. Women started to see this. I can get money for my education. I don't know about you all, but I still have student loans while I'm paying a mortgage. It would have been nice to have had money, right? To pay for my education. Women started seeing this as a tool, as a way to say, oh, guess what? I can actually use my God-given talents and gifts and advance these to pursue my education. And then there was the advent of the platform. The platform is extremely important. I'm going to talk about that later. The platform is this. You can't just be pretty. You can't just be attractive. You can't just be articulate on stage when you're being asked questions. You can't just have a talent. You have to put boots on the ground in the name of community service. They don't have a rule, like it's not like 50 hours of community service and you're the ideal Miss America. It doesn't work like that. The way it works is you pick an organization, like a nonprofit or a charity that you're going to partner with, and then your job is to work your butt off for that cause. And that's one of the ways to transform. Guess what? These women aren't just sort of these removed, you know, unengaged on a pedestal women. No, they're actually doing stuff. They're getting their hands dirty in the community. So the new millennium brought about many exciting changes. When I say the new millennium, I mean 2000, 2001. The television situation changed. It had originally been on network television. It was dropped. Now we have cable television, which didn't exist back then. It was on the country music channel. Now it's on the learning channel. And there's no end in sight for where pageants are going to be. Yes, Miss New York is the current Miss America. Yes, I know what you want to say. Yes, and she's gorgeous. She literally just won about 8 weeks ago. Or what is this? What month is this? Oh, it's February already. Okay, so maybe it was more like 16 weeks ago. But there's no end in sight, right? You know, as old-fashioned and as anachronistic as people might accuse beauty pageants of being, women are still doing it, and they're still getting empowered from it and getting money for their education from it. All right, so I'm going to move into more about whether or not pageants are actually anti-feminist. Before I do that, does anyone have any questions? Go ahead. I can't hear you. Say that again. That's a great question. So in the old days, and actually if we have time, I should probably look at my clock, I'll show a video of the pageant in like the 60s. You had to, your measurements were read off. You had to walk back and forth, and you had to be attractive, and you had to be trained in being poised. But there was no, up to a certain point, there was no platform. There was no, you had to have a 3.0 GPA. Like there was none of that, right? It was just, you applied, and it was just like any other job. Either you were selected. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
I thought it was primarily white people.
Well, we're going to talk about that. Okay. So it wasn't explicitly stated that only white people are supposed to be in pageant, but it ended up being the case that this beautiful lady right here, yes, you would not have seen her. Does someone else have a question over here? Okay. All right. So, did you have a question? No? Okay. All right. I thought you saw you raise your hand. I thought I saw you raise your hand. All right. So moving on. So the Miss America pageant was actually quite successful. There are now 4 main pageant systems. There's more than 4 pageants. Trust me. There are thousands of pageants. You can be anywhere from 2 to 60 and be in a pageant. Like there's a pageant system for everybody. There's a pageant system if you're a single mom by choice. There's a pageant system if you're divorced. There's a pageant system if you're an environmentalist. There's literally a pageant system for every single person who wants to ever be in a pageant. That doesn't mean you're all going to win scholarship money. It just means that at any stage of your life or your career where you are, there's a pageant that you could get involved in. So the main ones are Miss USA, Miss Universe, Miss World, and Miss Earth. The Miss America track takes you to run for Miss World. I don't know why my clicking thing isn't working here. The Miss USA takes you to run for Miss Universe. Miss Universe, I should have Miss America up there. There's also misses for each of these. So if you're Miss, you have to not be married. That's one requirement. You did ask me. You can't be married. In fact, one woman got married 3 months after getting crowned, and they took her crown away. You're not supposed to be married if you're Miss. Do the misses, right? Like, that's the argument. There's also men's pageants. There's also international pageants. So these are the main ones right here. And I'm probably missing some on that list because there's so many. Mrs. International is pretty huge, as is Miss International. And then for every single pageant you have for young women who are not married or women who are married, there's a junior version of that. There's a junior Miss America. There's a teen. There's a toddler. It's like boxing. You know how in boxing some of these categories are very thinly sliced? There's the featherweight, super flyweight, this, that, and the other. And it's almost like there's 3 to 4 pound increments going all the way from 125 pounds up to 205 pounds. It's the same way. For children's pageants, because it is such an industry, at any age you can be in a pageant and specifically be in a particular bracket. For example, there's Little Junior Miss, Miss Teen America, All Teen America. There's the Sunburst Beauty Pageant System, which has all ages, like I said, ranging from here to here. There's the Cinderella International Scholarship Pageant. There's loads of local and state pageants, loads of them. And then there's pageants for people of color, because traditionally speaking, they have not been held up to be ideals of beauty. I believe there's more than just Miss Chinese America. I believe there might be Mrs. Chinese, and there might be other Asian ones, but I'm not actually sure. I only specifically found documentation on Miss Chinese America, so that's the one I'm willing to put up. There's Mrs. Galaxy, that's for Hispanics. There's Miss Black America. Miss Black America, we're going to talk about that. That's probably the oldest pageant for people of color. There's Black and Natural pageant. So you can't be you have to have your natural hair. There's Miss Black USA, which is also kind of a long-standing pageant. The Miss Black America pageant is very old. That pageant is older than anyone in this room. There's American Beauties Plus, which is a teen pageant for African-American women. There's Black Glow, Black and Natural, Exquisite Teen, International Teen. I'm not even sure what that is. Little Miss Black Teen, Miss Black Teen Ambassador. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. You can be in a pageant tomorrow if you want to. There's so many pageants that are ongoing all of the time. It is such a big industry. There's also pageants for men, as I said before. So over there I put Mr. America, but there's also Mr. United States. There's Mr. Gay America. There's Mr. America Bodybuilding, which is not to be which is not to be confused with Mr. Olympia and Mr. Universe, like what Arnold Schwarzenegger did. I don't actually remember what NABBA means. I think it means National Association of Bodybuilders of America or something like that. That's another bodybuilding pageant. There's also Mr. and Miss Olympia. Whoa, how did I get on this slide already? So, it's hard to argue with so much success for nearly 100 years, but with women's issues, it's continuing to change. A lot of people still think that pageants are sexist. So if you place women in competition with one another based solely on their appearance, or men, but let's just stick with women because women are constantly fighting the battle of being objectified. A recent poll conducted by debate.org, normal people like you and I, and your parents and friends, and my parents and friends, and whatever else, say yes, 77%, pageants are a mode of sexual exploitation and sexist behavior. 23% say no. What do you guys think? Go ahead. Okay, just let it marinate, okay? Let that question marinate. Because as wise as we might all be in this room, we do not have the answer. We don't have the answer. Are women who are doing it allowing themselves to be objectified? I don't know. I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing. Never forget that feminism and the Miss America pageant are inextricably linked. And a lot of people don't know this. The feminist movement as we know it owes a lot of its branding to the Miss America organization. A lot of people don't know that. Why is that? Well, in 1968, a group of feminist protesters stormed the Atlantic City Boardwalk, and I say stormed, they just held a protest. Because that's the site of where the Miss America was going to be crowned for the following year. They were led by the New York Radical Women, which originally had 200 people, but another 200 people showed up, ending up with 400 people. And they were arguing, their whole thing was, we do not like the Miss America contest, it objectifies women. So it's a small group of women. They were also associated with other leftist movements, including the Civil Rights Movement, the New Left, and the anti-war movement. They wanted a larger stage, right? So they had pretty much not been in the limelight very much. So they decided, we need something huge. Oh, the Miss America pageant is perfect. That's a perfect place for us to go. So they had to get a permit, just like any other group of protesters. And in their permit, they said the purpose of their protest was to, quote, demonstrate their objections to the pageant's focus on women's bodies over their brains, on youth rather than maturity, and on commercialism rather than humanity. A very elegant way of putting it. At the actual protest, they handed out flyers. They had a fake puppet woman wearing, I don't remember what she was wearing. I want to say like a red, white, and blue bathing suit or something like that. But it was just like a cardboard woman in chains. The chains are representing the oppression of the feminist ideals. They had a sheep, which they put a bow on and a crown. You remember this, or you've heard about it? And their argument was, what are we, at the county fair? This is just like livestock. You're putting these women on stage, you're walking them out there. It's like a dog show, right? Oh, let's just put the blue bow on the piece of cattle that wins. So they were really adamant about, no, Miss America is not forwarding the role of women in society. This is not good. This is anti-feminist. So they were actually quite successful. They drew lots of attention to their cause, which is what they wanted. That's why they chose Miss America, and they got their proceedings, their protest, recorded, made in the news. So there was something called the Freedom Trash Can. And this freedom trash can is there in the background of the feminist movement to this day. This freedom trash can was meant to symbolize all of the bad stuff about being a woman in the United States. They threw instruments of female torture, that's what they called them, into this freedom trash can as a way to protest being bonded by these things. They saw the pageant, the Miss America pageant, and all of the symbols surrounding it as oppressing women. They decried the emphasis on an arbitrary standard of beauty as opposed to what comes inside. They were against the labeling, public worship, and exploitation of the, quote, most beautiful girl in America. But here's the key point. The New York Radical Women's leader, her name was Robin Morgan, chose the freedom trash can because in 1968, men who didn't want to go to Vietnam were burning their draft cards. And that was a huge symbol of F the establishment. You can't make me go. I don't even have a card. And they'd light them on fire, and that was their protest. So Robin Morgan's argument was, we need to burn the establishment, oppressive instruments of suppression, female torture. We need to burn those things ourselves. So we're going to put all of these things in this trash can, and we're going to burn them. And the symbolism is supposed to be the same as burning your draft card if you're a man that doesn't want to or doesn't believe in the Vietnam War. So this is the actual freedom trash can. Women throwing stuff into it. Women threw mops, pots and pans. Notice I have bras at the bottom here. There's a reason that that is asterisked. Cosmopolitan and Playboy magazines. High-heeled shoes, false eyelashes. Eyelash curlers were also included in that. Corsets, curlers, girdles, hairspray, makeup. All the stuff that women use to make themselves more attractive, whether it's every day or just sometimes or on the weekends, or just to clean the house. These are all instruments of oppression. They threw these in this trash can and say, we're not going to this is our symbolic burning of it. But here's the thing. Because they went about this the right way, they applied for a permit. They wrote their rationale. They never actually burned the trash can because their permit wouldn't permit them to, because the Atlantic City Boardwalk is made out of wood. You can't have a fire when there's wood underneath the freaking trash can. So it was a symbolic burning. They just threw the stuff in there and said, this is what we would burn. They never even actually burned it like men actually burning their draft cards. Can you imagine? It'd be like burning your Social Security card. These are things you can buy a new one. You can buy a new mop. You can't buy a new draft card. And they didn't even burn it. All right, keep going. So several of the protesters actually got in. They bought some tickets, snuck in. They had a little banner. And in the middle of the outgoing speech of the 1968 Miss America, they started shouting, "No more Miss America, women's lib." Guess what the TV cameras did? They didn't look at those protesters. They stayed right on stage at the Miss America outgoing, giving her speech. They did not acknowledge them. You could hear what's going on. The woman kept talking, and they were pretty quickly taken out. They got like maybe 6 or 8 shouts off, and then it was, all right, you got to go. But here's the thing. Because they yelled women's liberation, some think that that might be where the term women's lib actually came from. Because even though the television camera stayed focused on the stage, newspapers wrote this, and they wrote about it. And this was the next day. Are you shaking your head?
Go on.
Okay. So the protest was actually successful at raising attention to the feminist cause. So here's the thing. Nobody actually burned their bra. That's the larger point. Nobody in the middle of Atlantic City took their bra off and put it in the trash can. These were all symbolically put in there. But this myth has persisted. Obviously, it would have been nice to have burned the trash can, but they weren't permitted to. So people that were at the event have time and time again for the past 50 years tried to clarify that no bras were actually burned. But to this day, you will still hear the myth or the moniker of the bra-burning feminist. And as much as the protests got them all the attention that they wanted, that myth of the bra burning has hung around their necks like, you know, just this thing they can't get rid of. It's just been dragging them down. All right, so I'm going to get into some more academic stuff. Does anyone have any questions? And Megan, if I said something wrong, please clarify, because this is not my area of expertise.
No, I was just going to say the thing about, it's so interesting when a term gets coined, right?
Yeah.
So it's conceptually in feminist circles, women's liberation, right?
Yeah.
I think maybe this is the moment when it transcends activist circles to the public, right?
Yes.
It's not like they're, you know, on the spot, like, hey, let's do women's liberation.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. So they didn't come up with the term women's lib at the protest. They shouted it, which brought it to the awareness of the public. Okay, all right. Thank you for clarifying that. So any other comments or questions before I move on into some heavier, more nuanced discussion about whether pageants are sexist or anti-feminist? Okay, so is there a consensus? Here we are, 51 years almost after the burning, the symbolic burning of the Freedom Trash Can. Do we know whether or not, is the jury still out? You tell me. Everyone has their own opinion, right? But in academic circles, the debate is still raging. I really much like an article by a woman named Bonnie J. Dow because she talks about the media's role in it. So rather than getting into every single article that's ever been written on the topic, this woman kind of takes a bird's eye view from how the media has treated the subject in a pro or anti-feminist way. And I like the way she put it. So according to her, in the second wave feminist mantra was the personal, that's right, I'm not using that microphone, is political, implying that women's individual problems were the outgrowth of their political status as an oppressed class. Implying that, the corresponding media mantra was the reverse, the political is personal, implying that the validity of feminist objections to a patriarchal system was easily discredited by the articulation of individual women's disavowal of that oppression. What does that mean? That's a big mouthful. I pulled that quote directly out, and I'm going to break it down for you. So what that basically means is the following. If there's one woman who does not feel that she has been mistreated or an object of, anti-feminist views or in any way, then the whole system doesn't mean anything. That's her argument. So their argument is, by flipping it, if the women who compete in pageants don't feel as though they're experiencing sexism, then the contests themselves cannot be considered anti-feminist. That's Bonnie's interpretation. That's stupid. That's akin to saying if there's one slave on a plantation who doesn't complain, oh, well then slavery as an institution is perfectly fine. So they're using the arguments of the women themselves against them who are empowering themselves with these institutions and saying, well, the political is now personal. I personally do not feel like I've been objectified. And since I'm a woman, then I am that one case of how this is incorrect. There's more to it. So Robin Morgan and the members of the NYRA were aligned with civil rights, anti-war, and New Left movement groups. So the analogy to the burning of draft cards and flags was not out of place. But her argument is that context, when you look at the bra burning myth, that context, it was taken out of context, right? The idea of bra burning was taken out of the context of, listen, we have all of these social issues that are not going right. And it's not necessarily that, you know, these things are being used to oppress women. It's that they personally disdain. They personally don't want to wear curlers or makeup or corsets or girdles. And it's completely lost the framework of the backdrop of burning draft cards and that whole I can make a symbolic gesture, and made more to, well, you know, you're just sort of have like this personal disdain for these particular objects. So her argument, and I hope I give this justice, is that it is the difference between a critique of an established system that oppresses women and a trivial gesture that the dominant media use as evidence that feminists had so little substance to complain about that they were concerned with their undergarments. So this is not, they're invalidating their critique, basically, which is all you care about is not wearing corsets, girdles, bras, or whatever else. Not this entire backdrop of, you know, there's this system that's wrong and there's this symbology that you're doing it within the framework of. Just you as an individual are protesting the actual act of wearing these and sort of blaming the system on it. So the members of the NYRA did go out of their way, and still have been, to really clarify systematically. Like, this isn't a, you know, I don't like to wear makeup and use a vacuum cleaner. This is a system that all of the women, including the women that are in the Miss America pageant, are being affected by. So they decided that a protest would be a good way to highlight the oppression that all of the women, including those that were in there competing in the Miss America pageant, were experiencing in their daily lives. But the idea is the pageant was perfect because there's racism in there. One of their arguments was that there had never been an African American that had made it to the finals of the contest. There's militarism in there, and there's militarism in there because whoever the winner was going to go entertain the troops off seas, so it's pro-military. And then it's capitalism in there because this is all based on the sponsors. All of these commercials, these women are just being used to sell products. So you've got this, you know, nice triumvirate of horrible things that represent oppression by our society, capitalism, racism, and sexism, all coming down in this one ideal symbol of a woman. And it got pretty nasty, going back and forth. She pointed out that the woman is supposed to be a mindless sex object image. Everything I basically just said. They had to go entertain the troops. At this time, it was in Vietnam. And it's all about whoever's sponsoring the pageant. There was also a parallel pageant that went on, believe it or not, that same day. But it was a protest, but it was in a different way. This was the first Miss Black America, was crowned in a parallel pageant that was also held in 1968 near the venue of the Miss America pageant. So there's all sorts of stuff going on in this time period. So there are definitely arguments against pageantry as being anti-feminist, sexist, anti-women, so on and so forth. So the voice of the women's liberation movement argued that their purpose was not to put down Miss America, but to attack male chauvinism the commercialization of beauty, racism, and oppression of women as symbolized by the pageant. Those same, the triple threat, racism, militarism, and capitalism that is symbolized by the Miss America pageant. That's their critique. Somehow you're supposed to be this sex symbol, but you have to also be pure and wholesome, but you're parading around in a bathing suit. They argue that the women can't be themselves. Don't have a brain. Yeah, okay, you're going to get a scholarship, but don't have any political views. Don't say what you think about what's going on. They encourage the women to just kind of be like inoffensive. And demeaning it even more, their prize is what? Some flowers, a crown, and a cloak. But we all know who has the real power, right? It's the men. So yes, they're being given this symbolic power, but they don't have any real power. So they're just arguing that, you know, this whole structure is just a game. So critics attacked these women who wrote this account and participated in the actual protest as basically being jealous. You're just mad. You're just trying to find another way to get attention. You don't have anything better to do. You're not parading around in a swimsuit. You're just parading around in a picket sign. Either way, you're still putting yourself out there trying to get attention, and you think it's cute that you're being political. But, and I'm trying to keep it in the perspective of the woman who's talking about the media's role in this, who wrote this article. This critique neatly forwards the myth that there was actually bra burning that went on, that did not, and that the women who made this protest were not actually driven by the political ideology of oppression and this triumvirate of racism, militarism, and sexism, but more driven by the fact that they don't have anything to do on a Saturday night. So they're cheapening the women who are making these protests and making this account and making these arguments, and forwarding the bra burning myth, which didn't actually happen. But there's pro-pageant arguments as well. There was a director, I think his name was Leonard Horn, who said that, guess what? This is not a silly beauty contest anymore. It's a relevant, social responsible activist whose message to women is all over the world. She is. A woman can do and be anything that she wants. The Washington Post came out with an article says that the Miss America organization transformed itself as a financial savior and empowering vehicle for hundreds of girls. One journalist implied that feminist opposition to the pageant was somehow anti-education. So if this pageant is giving out scholarships, if you're against the pageant, then you don't want these girls to get the money for their education. Falsely equating the two. That's not how it works. It is actually a huge source of women's scholarships. So think about it, ladies. Miss New York, she is the current Miss America. Think about it. Or don't think about it. Whatever you want. The point is, it is an actual tangible way to pay for stuff. A professor commented that the pageant is a legitimate structured, quote, entry into society that gives women the visibility and potential for big bucks that, I'm talking really fast because I realize I might run out of time, professional sports does for men. Oh, Susie can't get a football scholarship. Maybe this is her only chance. Her brother Bobby, he's getting a hockey scholarship. This is all she's got. She can only forward her potential looks. The problem with this particular argument is that it's acknowledging that the system is unfair, that there's far more opportunities for men to fund their own educations than there are for women, but basically saying that, oh, but it makes up for it because, you know, there's some educational opportunity. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a stab wound. The larger problem is that women have less opportunities, not that the Miss America organization actually fixes it. That doesn't mean it doesn't, it just means we still need to fix the system. So the critique here is that continued feminist activism dedicated to expanding women's opportunities might be actually a better solution than just bunches of pageant systems that have scholarship opportunities. So, you know, that particular professor is basically saying, well, here's the antidote, which doesn't make any sense at all. Here's the antidote. Let's just have pageants, and then women can have their own thing. What about pro-women arguments? So I've been focusing very much on pageants and on feminism. What about the women themselves, right? Like, are they getting lost in this whole thing? Another journalist suggests that Miss America contests are actually, quote, more liberated than most women, because it's like any woman who's ambitious but is also not afraid to admit it. The argument being that for every Hillary Clinton who, you know, is willing to put herself out there, or Sarah Palin, and go for what she wants, there's a bunch of women who are also just as ambitious, but for whatever reason aren't willing to take the steps necessary. So his argument is, no, these are women who are actually very, very believing in their own agency, and they're willing to put themselves out there. So for this particular journalist, Miss America is ultimately a reflection of the modern, ambitious woman. If you ridicule her, then any woman who's ever tried to do it, you're ridiculing her also. We all know the valedictorian, who's also the prom queen and the star of the basketball team, and very, very pretty, you know, and just the one woman that does it all, or the handful of women that does it all. You're ridiculing that one, because that's all basically Miss America is embodying, the women that are trying to do everything on all fronts. So, all right, I got to speed it up. The argument basically is the women are not buying into this. Then the women are not just, oh, guess what, you know, objectify me. No, they're playing the game. They're forwarding themselves. They're playing the game. They know what side their bread is buttered on, and they need money to pay for school. A woman argued, I'm in a position to do good for women, and I can do it better this way than by carrying a picket sign, because I talk with leaders and community leaders and business leaders, and you can't exploit me. And guess what? If that means I have to be on stage for 30 seconds in a swimsuit to get a $30,000 scholarship, you damn Skippy, I'm going to do that. That's their argument, right? Like, sure. Think you're exploiting me, but just because you're looking at me, that doesn't give you power over my body. That's what some of these women would argue. So the genius of the whole pro-women being, you know, agents of their own ability is that this somehow makes it equivalent to feminism, which isn't necessarily the case. Yes, these women are playing the game, and they're using the system, and they're gaming the system and all of that stuff, but that doesn't make the pageantry not anti-feminist just because, you know, some women are smart. And that doesn't make the women themselves pro or anti-feminist. All right, so just moving on. So I'm talking about the United States. This is a worldwide phenomenon. If you get a chance, Google Katrina Gray. She's the current Miss Universe. Oh my God, she is gorgeous. But believe it or not, other countries are blowing us away. So yes, Miss America is one of the originators, but if you look at Miss Universe and some of the other ones, a lot of other countries are winning. The Philippines is crazy about pageantry. The whole country took off when Katrina Gray, who was from the Philippines, came home for her parade after winning Miss Universe. And a lot of these women are, you know, they've been groomed for this for a long time. Katrina Gray, when she was 8 years old, her mother said, I dreamed that you won Miss Universe and you were wearing a red dress. She sure enough was wearing a red dress when she won. So it's not just the United States. I also want to talk about, a lot of women have used this as a platform. Gal Gadot, that's Wonder Woman. She was Miss Israel 2004. Michelle Pfeiffer, there's loads of examples, but I'm only going to give you like a handful. Diane Sawyer, well-respected American journalist. Holly Berry. And the biggest dog of them all, Oprah Winfrey, was a beauty pageant queen. What did you say back there? I didn't know that either until I did research for this. She was Miss Black Teen in 1971. Tell me she's not successful. I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying, look. That's all I'm saying. All right, so lots of women have, forwarded their career, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's loads of women. All right, so I'm just going to briefly talk about the platform. You have to have community service. I have Turning Broken into Brave because a woman was a marketing genius when she branded this as abused children, epilepsy, opioid addiction. You have to have a platform that you can carry to national and international levels. My platform is Helping Birds Help People, which is an environmental cause. So my coach, yes, I hired a coach because you can't win unless you have a coach, told me, if you do not win this, please run for Mrs. Earth because I love your cause. It's very environmentally focused. And I have to tell you guys, do not use products with palm oil. Use bird-friendly coffee. And I get to meet with Antonio Delgado as part of my platform. I have a website as part of my platform. And I am now the host of a television show as part of my platform. So you can totally use these to advance your career. All right, my last question. What would you like to see women in beauty pageants do? Go. More politically based speeches. So one woman, instead of rattling out, they gave statistics for women that had been raped rather than answering the question. So they did that in the middle of the contest. Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to see less younger people in the industry.
Okay, so more grown-ups like myself.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Pageants are a competition, right?
Yes.
So why are we putting women against women?
As opposed to men against men, or as opposed to anything?
Just in general, why do we have to continuously put women against women in society?
Yeah, but isn't that what the Olympics is?
Right, but I'm not.
I mean, literally everything we do, sports, everything we do is a competition.
Right, I'm not
Yeah.
pro any of that.
Okay, but you're saying but what if it's men against men? Is that okay?
No,
So anybody against anybody is not okay.
I think everyone should be equal.
Okay, so there should be no competitions in any way. No knitting, no sports, no cooking, no bake-offs. Okay, all right. I love you guys. Please invite me back. Gotta go. That's a great point, though.